Judge Flynn is a Phi Beta Kappa. She has an AB from Boston University. She graduated with honors. She graduated from Boston University Law School, magna cum laude, in 1944. Judge Flynn was admitted to the Massachusetts Bar in 1944, the New Hampshire Bar in 1952. Fresh out of law school, Margaret Flynn clerked to justices of the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court from 1944 to 1946, after which she engaged in the general practice of law in Boston and Nashua until 1986, when she was elevated to the New Hampshire Superior Court bench, where she served until her retirement in 1992. Judge Flynn was the second woman in New Hampshire to be appointed to the Superior Court. Judge Flynn is married to the Honorable Charles J. Flynn, also retired from the Superior Court bench. The judges Flynn have two daughters, Catherine Elizabeth Flynn, who has a law degree from BU, and Margaret Crimmins Flynn, who has an MD from Dartmouth Medical. Judge Flynn, let's begin with some background information about your family and your childhood.
Well, I remember principally my childhood as being a very, very happy childhood in a typical middle-class family home. We grew up during the Depression, in which if your father had a job, you were lucky, and we were lucky enough that my father did. I had three brothers, two of which were older and one younger. My mother was a homemaker, and I say that in the most wonderful sense of the word. Sometimes I wonder why I wanted to have a career, because she made such a wonderfully beautiful home for all the family. But anyway, at any rate, I at some point decided I wanted both homemaking and career. But it was a happy day. I can remember things were so different. You'd have the coal man that would come into your yard and deliver the coal, and the iceman came with an ice on his back, and nobody had refrigerators. Very, very few people had cars. You walked every place mostly that you went. But in those days, families were very, very solid. I never knew of a person in the whole town of Stoughton that got divorced. And it's perhaps some type of a family life that society needs to get back to today.
So where were you born, Judge Flynn?
Well, I was born in Stoughton, Mass. That was a small town, about 10,000 people, just south of Boston, 18 miles south of Boston. One of its principal advantages, as I grew up, was its accessibility to Boston. We had great train service. There was a town next door, Brockton, which was kind of a good-sized city that had good trolley service. And it was sort of a small town. And in those days, you went to, if you were a Catholic, you went to parochial school, and then went down to the high school. Anyway, it was a very pleasant country place to be brought up in. I only knew, I think there was one lawyer in town, which I look back was probably an advantage, but lawyers didn't play much of any part in anybody's lives in those days.
Did you have a childhood hero?
Well, not a childhood hero, but I think as I grew older, I had certainly some role models, especially in high school, and before high school, too. Amelia Earhart, for example, was one of my great loves. I can remember praying every night that she'd be found when she was lost in the South Pacific. I was a great admirer of Eleanor Roosevelt. There was a columnist by the name of Dorothy Thompson who wrote regularly in syndicated columns, I think in papers all over the country, and I was also a great admirer of hers. In fact, one of the things I first wanted to go into, I believe, was journalism. And I think Frances Perkins, she was in Franklin Roosevelt cabinet. In other words, I guess I really admired women who were doing things, and there weren't very many in those days, but they were really high caliber, the ones that were doing it.
And what about your early work experience? This would have been before you got into law school. And
Well, I'll have you know that I worked in the theater for the State Theater in Stoughton and sold tickets for 25 cents an hour. back in when I was a junior in high school. And I got the job through the principal of the high school, and I guess I thought I was pretty lucky, not only because I got 25 cents an hour, but I had control of the passes. And I guess the manager was kind of generous, and he said, you can give some to your family and friends. So I really had a lot of my family started to go to the movies much more than they ever had, and I had some friends, and I was judicious even at those days as far as giving them out. But I remember the 25 cents an hour, and the admission was 10 cents for children, and I think 25 cents for adults, and 35 cents on weekends. And I guess that's the only work I really did outside the home when I was young.
Is that where you met your husband?
No. I met my husband when I was in law school. He was was at BU at the same time I was. BU at that time had a round-the-clock, so to speak, 3-semester law school. They ran it year-round. As I remember, when Judge Bounds tapes, Columbia did the same thing. The object being to give the men get as much of their education in as they could before they went into the service, so that my husband really was any day going to go into the service too. But I met him at